Hello and welcome to the 10th episode of the Rangers Gameplan Podcast, where we discuss the week that was the New York Rangers. I am Weston, joined by Evan, and we're here to talk about a little touch of coaching news, but really the meat and potatoes is going to be non-Rangers related stuff, talking about the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah, it definitely sucks that we're not playing right now, obviously. But there was, a lot of fun games to end the second round. Which the second round started off, nothing but blowouts. So at least there were some fun games in there to wrap it up. I guess obviously the biggest elimination from the playoffs would be the team that plays in Toronto. They've done it again. They have done it again. They finally. It's how do I say this? So the best this core has done for the Maple Leafs has been winning 5 out of 16 games.
That's incredible.
Five. Like that's just I don't know. I feel like every year we say, oh, there's going to be big changes with them. They're going to make some big moves. Like a lot of guys have to get traded, and it just never happens. So I'm interested to see if they actually do anything. We'll see though.
They're done again, and that really is wild. And obviously, I think you're starting with them to talk about a certain player or not a player, but a certain person in that organization who might be the head to roll. I can't believe they did it again. I really thought, and I've thought this for the past 3 years, ever since Montreal. I'm like, as soon as they get out of the first round, they're just going to go wild. Like, they're going to make a run either to the Cup final or maybe all the way to winning a Cup. And they stunned Tampa by... What I think is funny is a lot of people around the league and Leafs fans that were like, you see, what they're doing right against Tampa is they're not outplaying the Lightning, but they're winning playoff-style games. And I'm like, that's not encouraging. I don't think you understand. That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
But
go ahead.
They pull it off, and Leafs fans win their Stanley Cup after the first round.
Yeah, the scenes on Maple Leaf Square after winning one round were just insane.
That's incredible. People, can you imagine a team celebrating like that after just winning the wild card weekend for, the NFL? Any fan base doing that much because they won a playoff game.
Yeah, I understand it to a certain extent, just because, I was 2 years old the last time they won a playoff round. So I get, being that way a little bit. I understand, being excited and the overwhelming joy that would come with winning your first playoff round since 2004. But the cockiness is what got to me.
That's what
they were chanting, we want Florida, we want Boston. Either way, even if Boston won Game 7, do we think the Leafs would have beat them? No. Just no way. And, like you said before, it always kind of felt like if they finally got over that hump, they would go on a run. And it's because you just look at their lineup and it just seemed like all they needed to do was just get past that mental barrier of, winning a round. The problem is that none of those guys that are supposed to carry that team did anything.
Oh my god.
Whatsoever.
Wow, what a concept!
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of a certain team that we like to watch. But anyway, I guess we'll just start talking about, Sheldon Keefe a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know kind of the general consensus from a lot of Rangers fans on if we want him or not. But what I will say is I would much rather him over pretty much any of the other, experienced coaches available. Apparently Larry Brooks wrote an article about the Rangers are, heavily interested in Mike Babcock, and I don't know what I'll do if that is the case. I don't know. There's just no way a guy like that's going to win a cup with the Rangers. And I have no fear in saying that, because if I'm wrong, that just means they won the cup. So I don't, you know what I'm saying? There's nothing for me to jinx here. But I mean, come on, man. All the other coaches that are available, they were fired because their players ended up hating them, like to a very severe extent. And the one thing I will say about Sheldon Keefe is, I mean, I don't know what coaching decision could have been made in that series against Florida, or really any other of the series he's coached with the Leafs, that would have made an impact. Like I feel like it's always been about the players there, because I mean, he hasn't really had a goalie up to this point, and his top players haven't done anything. And if he comes here, I definitely have some bad news for him. But I mean, I just can't confidently say that that he is the issue there. I mean, how many playoff series does any team win without their top players scoring? We've just talked about this 2 weeks, leading up to this episode. I mean, it's just not possible to win without your top players performing. And he's obviously a very passionate coach. I don't think anybody really knocks his X's and O's ability or lack of adjustments. I feel like the majority of the critique towards him is just a bunch of angry Leafs fans that are somewhat delusional. I don't think there's any actual criticism anybody can truly give him. I mean, Austin Matthews, what does he make? 11 mil? 11? It's something like that, and he's due for a raise. Okay, so I mean, he had no goals in that series, and he didn't really do much against Tampa either. I don't know if he scored. I really don't, but I just didn't hear his name all that much. And he's never really had an outstanding, run at the playoffs yet. And he's been in the league for 7 years, which, by the way, is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
I remember his rookie year and all the hype. It feels like 2 or 3 years ago, but I mean, he's been in this league for 7 years, and he hasn't been able to do anything in the playoffs. It's concerning on his part, and in terms of their whole organization, they have a lot of thinking to do. I think Kyle Dubas would be back, I would assume, just because, I mean, at this point, what's the point in firing him? I mean, he's already built this entire roster. If you hire someone else, there's really not too many moves they can make as it is, just because of how tied to the cap they are.
Yeah.
So you might as well just let him stick around. And I feel like Kyle Dubas is... He will feel more inclined to keeping his players than the coach. He might not even think that there's any issue with Sheldon Keefe whatsoever, but I just think at this point, he unfortunately needs to take the hit for it, whether that be the correct decision or not. I can't see Kyle Dubas keeping the coach and trading one of these players that he has brought in and invested all that time and money into. I just don't see it happening. Obviously, we'll see, crazier things have happened, but I just can't imagine a world where Sheldon Keefe stays and, let's say, Austin Matthews gets, let go or something like that. I can't envision that. So, I mean, if Sheldon Keefe were the coach of this team, I would obviously have to, we'd all have to wait and see how things shake out, but I wouldn't be upset. I really wouldn't.
I think with Sheldon Keefe, I think there's 2 people for the Leafs organization that are going to take the fall for losing that playoff round against Florida and not getting anywhere really again. And it's either going to be Keefe or maybe Mitch Marner, because I think that contract would be easiest to move out of Toronto.
Yeah.
And I'll take either one, by the way.
Yeah.
I think, and again, I think Keefe is a really good head coach, and if he is available and the Rangers hire him, you might say, well, it's another coach that's been fired that you're taking on. This is not a player or a coach that's been fired multiple times, and he wasn't fired because he royally screwed up. He was fired because someone had to go, and you didn't want to trade one of the players.
Yeah.
I think that bodes well. And with Kyle Dubas, I think Toronto getting rid of Dubas as the GM would be a mistake. I really do. Because you look at the roster Toronto has had the past few years, every year since 2020, you've looked at that roster and been like, man, this might be the best Toronto Maple Leafs roster they've ever assembled. And then they somehow get better. It's not his fault. It's not his fault that Matthews will score 60 goals in the regular season in like 72 games and then get 2 assists that are both secondary in the playoffs. It's not his fault.
Yeah, there's just nothing. And the one other thing I will say about Sheldon Keefe is he will give his players opportunities for endless amounts of time. I mean, any young player he's ever had, he's given them plenty of opportunities. So, I mean, obviously we've talked a lot about needing to see more out of the young guys on our team, and I would just blatantly guarantee that Laughing Kaka would be immediately in the top 6 here, and they would get plenty of time there.
Dude,
so
look at the patience he had with Michael Bunting. I mean, that guy debuted till he was like 25 and was a top 6 forward this year for Toronto and was good in that position. I would definitely be down for him. Here's a question that I thought of on the fly, and I could be very stupid and wrong here. Drury is the acting GM and president, right? How would you feel theoretically about Kyle Dubas as Rangers president if he were fired and you could somehow lure him over?
I wouldn't mind it, just because, I mean, obviously that's a long shot, but hypothetically, I mean, he has been very, very aggressive every single year in, trying to get the best possible players available, on the Leafs. And considering the Rangers are in a win now position, Drury, he's aggressive in himself, but I think, having 2 guys like that are pretty much, in that mindset of, do whatever it takes to make the roster as best as it could possibly be, I would 100% be down for that. Now, who knows, if that'll happen, but that would be awesome. Obviously, I don't even know if he's going to get fired or anything like that. The one thing that I did find interesting, and I think the Toronto media has made a lot of noise about, is the fact that Brendan Shanahan wasn't there with Kyle Dubas to answer questions. That doesn't just happen by accident. There's meaning behind that. So the fact that he hasn't spoken yet is telling me he will probably let him go. Just because, he'll let Dubas say what he has to say, he'll let the players say everything, and then he will come out and lay down the full off-season plan and what they're, what direction they're moving towards.
Yeah.
If Dubas was staying, I think we already would have, heard from Shanahan at this point. So, I mean, if you're going to fire Dubas, then how can you bring Sheldon Keefe back? It just doesn't make any sense. I think if you're going to make that drastic of a move, you might just, kind of have to clean house with, pretty much all your staff, just because at this point, I mean, like you said before, it seems like every year the Maple Leafs roster looks better than the one prior.
Dude,
this year it was real good. It was really good, man.
They had 3 legitimate first-line centers. Their third-line center was Ryan O'Reilly. Half the teams in the NHL right now, if given the option, would have him as their first-line center tomorrow. He would absolutely automatically be the Rangers' second line, and debatably, because of how good he is defensively, maybe edge out Mika, but it'd be tight. Even now at this point in his career, and he was the third line.
Yeah,
I don't understand how.
And do what he oh did. Man, I think, and I remember, it was a while ago when we came out here and talked about we were previewing a little bit of every series, and we were saying that how if the Leafs are going to get over the hump, how are they going to do it against Vasilevsky? And I think if Vasilevsky plays to his normal self in that series, they beat the Leafs for sure. So I mean, it's not that it matters. Obviously, they won one game after that, but I mean, it's just a blatant struggle for any of their top guys to do anything in the playoffs. I mean, they squeaked a lot of soft goals by Vasi in that series. It's not like they really played that outstanding. And the the main topic of this is talking about Sheldon Keefe. Obviously, like I said before,
but
he couldn't have done anything to change that, man. I mean, all their top guys went long stretches without scoring goals in the playoffs. I think Marner went 8 games. I don't think Tavares really did all that much. So
he was solid against Tampa, but against the Panthers was I mean,
yeah. So I mean, like we keep saying, even with the Rangers, you cannot win without your top players. And what is he supposed to do? Because it's not like he's not making adjustments. It's not like he's a bad X's and O's guy.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is he made the adjustment in the Florida series because he realized, hey, if you go blocker side out far, like out wide against Vasilevsky, you're going to beat him on the blocker side every time. And they started doing that, and they fucking did. The Morgan Riley's OT winner and Tavares' OT winner in that series that won game 4 and 6, both were distant shots on the blocker side, or at least standing on the blocker side that trickled through. He figured out how to beat him. They beat him. If anything, he's the reason they got out of the first series against Tampa. And then against the Panthers, I don't know, man. The Panthers just are the Panthers, I guess.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about, the Panthers-Canes series in a bit, but I feel like the Panthers are different than most Cinderella stories because they won the President's Trophy last year. So it's not like we haven't, obviously there's a different makeup of the team, but a lot of those guys, were there last year. So it's not like we haven't seen them play this way before, like that, lockdown style of defense. They're very difficult to play against. They're awesome, at forechecking. They did all those things last year, and they just had a really tough start to this season, and they just started doing all those things again, and now they're in the conference finals. So they just feel a little different than most Cinderella stories to me, just because this is a team a lot of people were scared of last year, and they just had a rough start and figured it out. So I don't know, man. I'm interested to see them play against the Canes. I guess, but before we dive into any of that, the one thing I wanted to say to wrap up, Sheldon Keefe and kind of the potential to going to the Rangers. Obviously, we've complained so much about this team's 5v5 play. The Leafs were, I believe, very, very good at in that aspect. All throughout the regular season, at least. I mean, they are phenomenal at just or I should say, Sheldon Keefe is phenomenal at putting his players in the right position to succeed, especially when you have that star-studded of a roster. It would be pretty similar of an adjustment for him to come over here. Obviously, it's just about the playoff success, but if you want to talk about, adding a new element to this Rangers team, obviously their strengths are the goaltending, and, at times their power play is, one of, if not the best in the league. Obviously, that didn't happen this year in the playoffs, but for 2 years straight, the Rangers power play has been able to show up pretty frequently. So if you can still have that power play, and obviously Igor isn't going anywhere, and you just unlock this team's ability to be really, really good 5-on-5, they will be a problem. And Sheldon Keefe is the only guy available that I can confidently say would have an impact at 5v5. I mean, I think any adjustment they make will make an improvement 5-on-5, just because I believe the last time I checked, the Rangers were 24th in the league in 5-on-5 play.
That sounds
so. It's
true.
it might be 22nd or 23rd, but regardless, it's somewhere in the 20s, which is obviously less than ideal.
Yeah.
So if they can just figure that out, I'm not saying you got to be the best team in the league, but like I said, if you have this great goalie and you have this lethal power play, and you just find a way to make this team really good 5-on-5, they will be one of the top 5 teams in the league without question. So that's the last thing I wanted to say to wrap that up, just because, like I said, I don't see Mike Babcock or Peter Laviolette or any of these other guys being able to make an impact like that.
Yeah. I I agree, and I want to throw something in there for defensive structure with a guy like Sheldon Keefe. Maple Leafs goaltenders the past 3 seasons. In 21, Jack Campbell ranked 6th in goal against. In 2021-22 last season, he was an all-star before, obviously, finished a little rough, but then finished 14th. And Ilya Samsonov this season finished, I think it was top 5?
Something like that,
Something
yeah.
around there.
It was definitely very good. I don't know if it was top 5, but it was right around there for sure.
It was near the top for goalie ranks, if I'm not mistaken. It will not load in all of a sudden. That's fantastic. Anyway, I think you bring a better defensive structure over, and that's what the Rangers have desperately needed. You already have debatably the best goaltender in the league. It's either him or Vasilevsky, and I know where I'm going to lean for that. If you give him any semblance of a defensive structure, you don't have to have the best defense in the league. If you can just be adequate in front of him, he's going to allow 1 goal a game if you're not handing him out to dry every single night.
Yeah, so the more we talk about it, the more on board that I am to bring in Sheldon Keefe. Mainly because we keep saying it's very, very slim pickings. With the coaching options. So it's either him or Knobloch for me, and I think the main reason we like Knobloch, obviously he's within our organization, but I think it's just that we don't know much about him that automatically makes us like him more than anybody else available or Gallant. So that's pretty much all that is. I don't know if he's really an outstanding coach, but the one thing I will say, he's made a deep playoff run with the Hartford Wolfpack without much to work with on that roster. It's not like he's got a whole lot of talent. I mean, Johnny Brodzinski is literally their best player. So
that's
it's and probably by a significant margin. So I mean, he doesn't have a whole lot to work with down there. So those are just my top 2 guys, and anyone else, I think I'll throw a fit about.
The absolute kicking and screaming fest that you're going to have 2 weeks from now when we talk about Mike Babcock being
oh my, because I'm already, the first round exit already, dwindled my hopes for this team down quite a bit, and then if you bring him in, I'm just gonna be, oh my, and I think it would just be such a disservice to the players because now this is a rumor, who knows, but apparently a lot of the players essentially asked for help because of the lack of adjustments from Gallant. So you see it in the playoff series. You see it in the playoff series where it's like, they're getting shut out through 2 periods, and they're on their 3rd different line combination of the night, and they just have no hope of scoring a goal because they don't feel comfortable. That's probably where that comes from. So if you're bringing Mike Babcock, do you think that's going to change? So if your players are coming to you and saying, hey, we need a coach that's better at, tactical adjustments, and then you bring in Mike Babcock, they might not even show up for training camp. Like it's as simple as that.
I hate that. I hate that so much. It'd be... I couldn't wait for his first presser to be talking about why he brought Wayne Simmons in.
Oh my god, yeah, jeez. Oh, I don't even want to think about that whatsoever.
I think he's going to pair great with Mika Zibanejad on that first line.
Oh my, yeah, so hopefully we'd never have to have that conversation. I guess that pretty much wraps up that part. I guess obviously we're now in the conference finals, so I guess I'll just start off by saying, how are you feeling about these two matchups? Because these are very unexpected ones.
This is so goddamn whack. If you listed them off and you're like, all right, in the West it's going to be Dallas and Vegas, I'd be like, totally with you. And then, all right, Carolina, yep, that checks out. It sucks that the Rangers probably got bounced early, but that happens. Florida, the fuck? The fact that the Florida Panthers have made it, and not cheap, by the way. This isn't just some team that has lucked into it. has made the Eastern Conference Final is insane. I thought they were losing in 5 to Boston. And that Marchand breakaway in Game 5, which I hope haunts Boston sports fans for the rest of their lives. I'm like, that's it. This is where it ends. And then Bobrovsky makes that save. Bobrovsky, who, after spending 3 years being absolute garbage on ice, just randomly decided, hey, I remember what I did in Columbus. What if I did that again? And just decided to.
Yeah, great. In Columbus, he was awesome in the playoffs, so it's cool to see him tap back into that. He's still not worth the contract, but I guess if they end up winning the cup, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was going to say, if they win a cup, no one is going to care. You know how many goals he allowed in each game against Toronto? 2.
I actually don't even know.
Across the board. 2 across the board.
And he made some outstanding saves in pretty much every game. Like, he made some ridiculous saves.
I want to look it up because I want to say it was in every game. He was outshot in 4 of the 5 games, and in Game 5, again, while facing with the possibility of eliminating the Maple Leafs, he stopped 50 of 52.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, if he can keep that up, man, I think the Panthers should be able to beat the Canes. I don't know. I think that series is going to go 7 no matter what.
100%.
That's just me. I mean, maybe 6, but if somebody wins in 6, it's going to be in overtime. I just think those teams play such a similar style defensively. And I mean, you just have to give the Panthers the edge for, goaltending. I think you have to. Not necessarily a knock on Freddie Anderson, but just the way that Bobrovsky's playing right now is
I'll make the
ridiculous.
knock against Freddie Anderson. He's been...
Yeah, we can go there. We can definitely go there. He hasn't really got, he hasn't cost his team a playoff game yet, which I feel like he's due for that because he has consistently done that. So that's definitely bad news for Canes fans because the yearly Freddie Anderson, bed shitting is due and it hasn't happened yet. So
can you imagine Toronto fans watching Freddie Anderson lift the cup?
Oh
it's
my!
God damn it!
That would just be salt in the wound like no other.
So
like that's insane.
That would be.
And even imagine because. I mean, Carter Verhaeghe was once with the Maple Leafs. So, I mean, regardless of who wins the cup, I mean, there's so many former Leafs that are just like, that would certainly help them right now.
That'd be so beautiful. You could certainly use a guy like Carter Verhaeghe. What about this Frederick Anderson fella? Oh, God, I forget his name. But there was a former Leaf that I was going to make a joke about, so I can't remember that. Duclair's still on the Panthers. Not a Leaf.
Yeah.
But,
former Ranger.
Rangers legend, Anthony Duclair.
Yeah. It's so just sad to see that, like, there's just so many former Rangers that are just... I don't want to just blatantly say better than half our team, but...
You can say that. This is a safe space.
I mean, because here's the thing. Like, we can say that, but... At the same time, though, it's taken Anthony Duclair up to this point to really get to this level. So it's not like, for the early, Ranger days that he had that he really showed anything like this. So, it's not like they just gave up on him for no reason or made a bad trade. Like, it sucks to see, but I mean, it's been a very long time. And Anthony Duclair has not really broken out up until, like, I believe last season. Mm-hmm. So I don't think anybody expected this. I don't know how many teams he's been on since the Rangers, but it's been quite a few for sure. So I mean, I'm sure a lot of teams are feeling the way we are about, wishing they still had him. I know the Senators probably feel that way. I can't remember. Wasn't he on the Flyers or no Columbus? Because I remember.
Columbus, yeah.
The only reason I thought the Flyers is because of Tortorella, but that was with Columbus because they did not like each other.
I gotta figure out where he was. I like Florida in this series, and I think they just kind of have that we're not gonna lose mentality at this point, and that sounds stupid. they knock off Boston in Game 7. So first off, you can already look at the fact they are not going to be closed out of a series. You can't just say, okay, we're up 2-0, series is over. No. No. They are not going to go quietly. They have mastered the art of getting away with everything after the whistle. I mean, you had, was it Kachuk after Game 4 that was just punching Mitch Marner in the face repeatedly?
Yes, yeah.
Which,
yeah.
like,
they do not care. They will do anything.
You have Rangers legend Mark Stahl, who just elbowed a Leaf in the face after Game 5, or during Game 5. I don't know if you caught that, but just...
Which, by the way, I saw a lot of Leafs fans complaining about that, which, I mean...
Yes.
Rightfully so,
Garbage
like, you can't
call.
do that.
You're correct.
However, I mean, if you look at the Game 6 in the Tampa series, Braden Point, or... I believe it was Braden Point, or it might have been Hagel. I don't remember, but somebody got tripped on the Lightning, and there was no call at the end of the third period.
Point.
So, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, at some point,
I feel
the hockey gods will get you back. Obviously, it's a very bad, non-call, but you just won the previous series because of the same situation, so...
My biggest thing with the Leafs fans that are upset is, like, I agree that it's stupid, and I agree that was a very important missed call that they did not make. That being said, maybe, just food for thought, maybe don't let your entire season boil down to one call that is or isn't there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, I respect the hell out of Florida and what they have done, because they have managed to make it now to the Eastern Conference Final. On paper, the Leafs should have blown them to hell and back after Game 5. Just straight up. I understand that Matthew Tkachuk can hang with anyone on that Leafs roster. I'm not going to say he can't. That being said, if you look me in the eyes with a straight face and say, going into next year, if I had to pick one, I would take Carter Verhaeghe over Mitch Marner. I would not believe you. No, you would not.
Yeah, that would be just ridiculous.
There's no better goal.
I'm sure there's been somebody that said that on Twitter at some point, but they probably got ratioed heavily.
Good for him. I'm proud of you. That being said, after you get past that one star with Tkachuk, and, you get to the defense, I mean, Aaron Ekblad was probably their best defenseman, and I'm not even trying to say anything bad about Aaron Ekblad, who's a fine player, but really, this should not have gone anywhere. And I understand the playoff Bob is back, but it's Bobrovsky in the year 2023.
Yeah.
You should have been able to score 5 on him with that roster. Matthew should have been able to do that alone, and he didn't.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Also, I looked it up for Anthony Duclair. Rangers, Arizona, Chicago, Columbus, Ottawa, and then the past 3 with Florida.
So I mean, it's definitely taken him a while. It makes me feel better that he didn't go from the Rangers to the Panthers and start playing like this.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say? If that were the case, then I would be livid. But at least, it's...
There was nearly a decade between then. Between when they traded him and when he decided
because I remember, I don't even remember what grade I was in when he was a rookie with the Rangers. So that's... like I just said, it just makes me feel better that he's had a couple, pit stops before breaking out. Because if he just immediately became, this player right after leaving the Rangers, I would. I would not be happy.
No, that would be painful. I'm not sure if you have much more to say about the Canes-Panthers series, but if you don't, can we move on to the next series?
Yeah, I definitely do not have too much else to say. We pretty much covered everything with that. Like I said, I just think it's going to 7 no matter what. Yeah. I'm pretty much locked in on that. In terms of, in the West, I'm feeling the Stars, man. I don't know about you, but I just think this might be their... I don't know if they're going to win the Cup, but I think... I mean, do they have the best goalie in the playoffs right now? I mean, obviously, it's either Ottinger or Bobrovsky, So you have to lean, with the team that has the goalie this late in the playoffs. You just have to.
I love the Dallas Stars. I really... Jake Ottinger's got to be one of my favorite goaltenders to watch in this sport.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, my God.
Oh, he was awesome last night. He was ridiculous.
Fantastic in that game last night. And, I mean... Your two goalies that you can go with if you're Vegas is going to be... I mean, maybe Aiden Hill?
Yeah, like, I don't see how they can win this series with Aiden Hill. I don't see it happening.
Or Lorette.
Yeah, I believe so. I don't know. I really don't know. I think they're just going to keep going with Aiden Hill at this point.
I mean...
Or at least for the first game, I would assume.
You'd have to.
So, I mean, the Vegas has home ice, though, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that might be their only true edge. I mean, Jack Eichel's played amazing in the playoffs so far. But I feel like the Stars just have a deeper team by a lot. And they have the goalie. And they have a lot of players that they've made a whole lot of deep playoff runs in, the somewhat recent future.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I mean, recent history. So, I just think they're hungrier, and I like I said, I just don't see how Aiden Hill is gonna beat Jake Ottinger. I just have no clue how that's gonna happen.
It's a matter with looking at Dallas. I think they're deeper, but on top of that, I think they have a lot more just... They have the playoff grit, and I know that's the total Gerard Gallant line, I don't care.
Yeah.
Jamie Benn alone outgrits the entirety of the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Just
For
outright.
sure. Yeah.
And
I also want to say that the ability that the Stars have to put up 2 or 3 goals extremely quickly is also huge because, if Jake Ottinger's having a hot game, and like we saw last night in the Game 7, it was a goalie battle for the first couple periods.
Yeah.
And obviously they didn't blow them out or anything like that, but it just seems like they don't really completely blow up in any period of the game necessarily. I mean, obviously you have a couple here and there, but you didn't really see it too much when it mattered. You know what I'm saying? So
right.
If this series, gets to 5, 6, or 7, I just don't see how the Stars are going to break down. I mean, like I just said, we've seen a couple games where the Stars, give up more goals than, anybody would expect. But soon as it's crunch time in a series, they completely flip a switch and lock it down. And I don't necessarily know if Vegas has that ability just because they don't have, the edge in the goalie battle. Mm-hmm. That's all. I think that's the main thing it's going to come down to.
I think what Dallas has going for them the most is like players that aren't heating up. The players that they have that are their star players that haven't done well have still done incredibly well.
Mm-hmm.
Where did he go? Jason Robertson has 2 goals in the playoffs, but still has 12 points. He has not done well, but he's still put up numbers. What I think is Heinz has 19 points. And
he's been ridiculous. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they extended him this year too. So they got to be feeling good about that.
Oh, they're like, bought at the right time, baby.
Yeah, because a lot of people were, saying he was overpaid at the time, and
mm-hmm.
I mean, it just looks like that is working out tremendously for them right now.
A player who has burst out for them, especially against Seattle, that I was just not expecting. Holy hell, Joe Pavelski looks back in his prime.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a playoff player. He really is.
Just chose to flick the switch on.
Yeah, and I mean, him and Kreider are really the top 2 net front guys in the league, and there's a huge gap between those 2 and everybody else. So, I mean, obviously Joe Pavelski has done it for longer, but Kreider is just as good at it. You can't think of anyone else that's in that category in terms of, deflections as those 2 players. So, having that, and I mean, the Stars don't have tremendous star talent, but they just have a crazy deep team. And like I mentioned before, a lot of that roster has, been on deep playoff runs, not only with the Stars, but just, throughout their careers, especially Joe Pavelski.
Oh,
So I just think they want it more. And I think the fact that they've gotten this far and the fact that there's not really, a Goliath of a team that's standing in front of them, I think that that's just going to fire them up more than anything. Because obviously in the bubble, you saw them play Tampa, and there was just no way they were going to beat Tampa at the time.
no.
That it just wasn't in the cards, But this year they don't have to play a team like Tampa. They can beat any of the teams remaining.
Am I tripping? Or that was Ben Bishop in net for them in that run, right?
That was Ben Bishop. Yes, it was. Yeah, that was such a fever dream. Yeah, but I mean, it's a lot of that same roster that was there. Even though obviously there's a huge asterisk on that season as a whole. But
did something happen in 2020 in the world? I can't quite remember.
Yeah, I can't put my finger on it. I think I heard something happen, but I don't know.
Whack. Anyway, back to current. I'll throw this out there for you. In the 3 regular season matchups, Dallas is 3-0 against Vegas.
Oh wow, that's for it to. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? Every playoff series that gets talked about, and it seems to not matter more often than not. So we'll see. But like I keep saying, Dallas is they're just such a deeper team. They just are. It's that simple, and it's not even like Vegas has a goalie that I'm really confident that can maybe steal you a couple games. I just don't see it. I think Dallas in 5 or 6. I really do think that.
You could talk me into that Vegas and Dallas are completely dead even in terms of talent on the roster for the forwards and the defensemen. You could talk me into that. But goalie matchup, it's not close. It's Ottinger, in my opinion, by a few miles. And that's what this is going to boil down to. It's going to be Ottinger steals them a game or two that they don't deserve. And that offense will find random games to just throw crooked numbers up and they'll win the series. In my opinion, can't wait to be wrong. Congratulations on winning in 5. I'm happy for you. But
yeah, I mean, like you just said, if you look at the two rosters, or the two lineups, I should say, side by side, you can definitely talk me into it that it's closer than I'm making it seem. But the way that the entirety of the Stars' top 6 and top 9 are playing right now, I think it just gives them the edge right there, because they have, obviously, like you just said, Hines has 19 points, and a lot of those other guys haven't really shown up to, what we've expected yet. So if he keeps doing what he has, and a lot of those other guys, turn it on, I think they could win the cup at this point.
Yeah, I think any team can legitimately go win the cup right now. Any of the 4.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think about, because all season everybody's been saying, "Oh, there's no way a Western team wins the cup." With the way that the playoffs have shaken out, where all of the top East teams are out, you could throw Carolina if you want. In terms of the category of Tampa, Boston, teams like that, I'm still not buying it. But it's just crazy how I'm sitting here saying, dude, Dallas might win it after months of saying that whoever, makes it to the cup final in the East will win in 4. I said that all season. But now I don't know. I don't know.
My dream matchup for the cup right now is Florida versus Stars, for the lone reason of I want every single Canadian hockey fan to cry the most embittered tears of the matchup being Sunrise, Florida versus Dallas, Texas. For that reason alone.
Yeah.
For the two most southern teams in this sport to make it to the final. As they're like, we haven't had a team since Bettman. Shut up.
Yeah.
Eat it. It's these two. Do you have much more? Because I do want to talk about a couple of round 2 matchups in the how did this happen before we do it.
I've pretty much said everything I wanted to say about the 2 conference final matchups. I just, like you said before, I can't wait to be so wrong.
It's gonna be
but
great.
We'll see. So
I want to work our way back. First off, to one of the teams we've discussed for the conference final. That's all of them. What am I saying? Jesus. Carolina and the Devils. That series that ended in 5.
Yeah.
I would love to act surprised.
I don't know, man. It's crazy. Like what did the Devils pull their goalie in 4 out of 5 of those games, or was it all 5?
I will look that up. You can continue on your piece.
I just, oh man. I mean, Schmidt gave up like 20 something goals in the playoffs. It's ridiculous. Obviously we sound like such, biased fans saying this, but I don't know how the Rangers didn't find a way to beat them. It's so unbelievable to me, because I'm sitting there and I'm watching some of these games in that series, and the game starts and ESPN starts, throwing the line graphics on the TV, and the third line is like Miles Wood, Michael McLeod, and Nathan Bastian, and I'm just like, how did nobody score against them? Obviously we'll take it on the chin. We lost and everything, but I just don't know how the Rangers didn't win that series. I have no clue.
I have spoken very deliberately when I've talked about the Devils-Rangers series and said that the Devils played better than the Rangers and deserved to win that series. I never said the Devils were a good team, because they simply they weren't. They pulled their goalie in 3 of the 4, but I'll put a caveat in there. One of the games they didn't. Vanacek allowed 4 goals on 30 shots, but that was the game the Devils scored 8 goals.
Yeah, so they could have very easily lost that one too.
If that was a normal offensive output, and that game is, 5-4, he probably gets pulled. But in 3 of the other games, it was, they pull Schmidt after game 1, they pull him after game 2, they pull Vanacek after game 4, and they let Schmidt stay in there to die in game 5. And
it's just it's so frustrating. It really is, because, like you said, the Devils were the better team in that series. No, we have never once disputed that. But at the same time, the Devils didn't necessarily do anything to prevent the Rangers from playing well. It's just like we keep saying, that our top guys just didn't show up. That's all that was. So it's super frustrating to lose in 7 in a series that you basically shot yourself in the foot, and see the team you just lost to struggle in basically every game in the series. It's so frustrating. At least if the Devils won that series, I'd be like, oh wow, they might actually be super legit. But you look at their lineup, it's not a deep lineup, and I mean, a lot of their defensemen were underperforming mightily, even in the Rangers series. I mean, Siegenthaler was terrible in the playoffs, and they just didn't have a goalie. And you sit there and look at that lineup and tell me that you're unable to beat that. It's just, oh man, I kind of blocked it from my mind at this point. But it's just, I just cannot believe, even if the Rangers did win in 7, it was frustrating in itself, because obviously they had the 2-0 lead and all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. But they still should have just been able to find a way, because you go from game 7, you get shut out, and the goalie that just shut you out gets pulled in the next game. 2 games he plays.
Yep.
That's not, he wasn't tested consistently by the Rangers. He just wasn't.
One thing that was the most wild part of the Canes Devils series was the weird arrogance Devils fans got after going down 0-2, like, yeah, got him right where we want him again. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, it's just not a winning recipe.
That was the difference is
that when you're down 2-0 to Carolina, you don't have to, Carolina's not just gonna pack it in. They play the same way every game. The Devils came back
is not going to allow them to do that.
The Rangers they just stopped trying. We keep saying that. That's all that was. I don't know why they thought that was going to happen again. They literally, I don't know. It's so, oh my God, I cannot believe that they lost to them. Like I keep saying, I'm not trying to sound like a sore loser.
I will.
But I have legitimate reason to feel this way. It's not like I'm sitting here obviously every single team that gets eliminated in the playoffs, they're like, oh, if we would have just won our series, we'd be fine. Everybody says that. I understand that. But I mean, come on, man. we said it last time too. If they won that series against the Devils, their path to the finals is wide open. And the one other thing that I will say that I know is going to freak you out even more, the Rangers were 11-1-1 against the remaining teams. So, I mean, come on. All they needed to do was just test Schmidt in Game 7. And who knows where we'd be right now. 11-1-1. 11-1-1.
That's fantastic. So, thank you for giving me that information. Because now that makes my car plowing into a street pole very appealing. And 11-1-1. Who did they lose to?
I believe they lost to they lost one game to Carolina, and
that's great.
One overtime game that I'm not sure who it came.
That's great.
Against.
No, that's fantastic.
But
that makes me
regardless, 11-1-1. So I mean,
oh, that's great. If only there was a way they could have, made it to this round. Like if only, the team hadn't vanished after game 2. That's.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. So we're just gonna be so bitter about it until opening night of the season, and we probably still will be better at that point as well.
I'm gonna be bitter about this until they hand Jacob Trouba the cup.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't know.
With the caveat of he better be in a Rangers jersey while doing that. If I have to watch Jacob Trouba lift the cup in a different jersey.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. I don't even know what I'll do at that point.
Can you imagine before the season? Cap dump, go somewhere else, wins the cup there.
Oh
Rangers fans sit, jaw agape. Like, oh yes, perfect.
Yeah, I don't want to have that conversation. There's so many. This year feels so weird because like I said, I believe the last episode, like last season was so devastating. It was like we weren't sitting here, necessarily super angry at the team. We were just sad because last year was so fun. Most of the season, I didn't feel any emotion because the team didn't feel any emotion, and they got first rounded. So it's just I'm sitting here like, what? Like, can somebody please do anything?
It was a season where it just felt so numb and meaningless, and like.
Yeah, and I just can't believe we actually believed that they would, that not trying for a whole season would work out. I don't know. I can't believe we actually believed the team when they were talking about that.
All right, the final matchup that I really want to get into before we call it a week. Evan, can you imagine having the best player in the sport, debatably the best player in the sport's history, and then right alongside him you have easily the second best player in the sport? Anyway, enough about the Los Angeles Angels. Let's talk about Edmonton.
Oh, man.
Oh, wait. Hark. It's the same thing.
I don't even know what to say about them at this point. You mentioned the Angels. At least the Oilers make the playoffs.
At least they do that.
That would be a wild conversation if they still had made the playoffs with McDavid on the team. That would be insane if that were the case. But I don't know, man. I just don't know what they could possibly do. It's not like they can make a massive trade. Like at this point, that team needs. I feel like there's just so many holes within their entire lineup. Obviously they have a bunch of great players outside of McDavid and Draisaitl, but they're supplemental players, and none of them really consistently pull their weight in the playoffs. Especially, they haven't been able to find a goalie yet, and I mean, I just can't think of one defenseman on that team that I'm actually scared of playing against.
Are you saying that Darnell Nurse doesn't make you shiver in your boots?
Yeah, I would say he doesn't for sure. Yeah, I don't know, man. And he got suspended in that series. A whole lot of crazy stuff happened in that series, but I just think that next year the lineup will probably be the same for them again. And I would bet a lot of money it's going to be the same result. So, and especially we talk about Vegas and Aiden Hill and all that stuff. You're telling me that the two best players in the sport couldn't win a series against him? It's not. Obviously, that series is not on them, right?
No.
But it's still just mind blowing that they didn't figure out a way to get it done against a goalie like that.
It's wild that you can have, and again, it's lost with how good Connor McDavid is. If Connor McDavid wasn't in the league, the difference between the best and second best player would still be miles because of how good Draisaitl is. People do not appreciate how utterly insane Leon Draisaitl is, and I think they're starting to, especially after that 4-goal game in the first game of the playoffs that they lost, by the way.
Yeah,
Draisaitl had 13 goals in 12 games in the playoffs.
Oh that's ridiculous.
Can you think about that for just a second? Over a goal per game in this NHL.
when you have just one player putting up a playoff performance like that, like how do you not at least make it to the conference final? It's crazy.
I think the reason is because you have this gentleman named Cody Ceci who's getting top minutes on your defense core.
Yeah, it's like I just said, I don't know how they can retool that roster in an impactful way unless they just get lucky. Like, there's no way that they can bring in, any of the top free agents or anything like that. So, barring them just finding some draft gem on defense or something like that, there's just no way they can really impactfully improve this roster. There's just no way.
What's so bonkers is, like, you have to figure out a way to retool it, but you cannot, because of the talent you have, because of their ages. You can't just say, because, like, I don't think Toronto will. I definitely don't think they will. If Toronto said, this core is not going to do it, we're just going to rebuild, we're going to completely strip it down to bare bones and start over, a lot of people would be like, that's insane, that's a bad idea. But a lot of people would get where they're coming from. The Oilers cannot just strip it all down with McDavid and Draisaitl on the same team, both in their prime simultaneously. You cannot do that. And
yeah,
but it borders on, is that what it would take? Because you have McDavid, who had 20 points in a quote-unquote bad playoff run. He still had 20 points, which is stupid.
Yeah.
You had Draisaitl with 13 goals, and you get nothing.
Nothing out of anyone else. And I honestly thought that a guy like Zach Hyman on that team would score some big playoff goals for them. It just hasn't happened. It just I don't know what else to, because guys like him aren't going to be moved. It like I keep saying, they really can't make any major changes to that team, and some of it is to their own fault, because like you just mentioned, I don't know how you can bring Cody Ceci on your team and expect him to play well regardless of how many minutes he's getting. He's been one of the whipping boys of this league for a few years now. Pretty much everybody has memed him for quite some time.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's getting that many impactful minutes on your team, like, what do you expect,
I don't know what you can possibly change with the Oilers. Like, unless next year Stuart Skinner decides, I will decide to be good, that I should do that. I don't know what you're going to get. You need a goaltender. And not even a good one. Just league average. Just get someone who can be mid.
Yeah.
And you'll get a lot better. The defense core is incredibly unintimidating. You have Bouchard, Ceci, Ekholm, Nurse, Whoopity-Doo, and the defense needs a retool. Everything on that team needs a retool, but you're locked in. McDavid's making $13 million?
Something like that. It's definitely
up there. And by
there.
the way, we talked about Austin Matthews is going to get a pay raise. I think this Connor McDavid fellow might get a pay increase when he comes up for contract again.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that.
Yeah.
I don't know how much more you can give him, but that is you give him everything he wants. If he says, I want to be 10% owner, you go, yep. Yeah, he's done and done.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and speaking about that a little bit, like we keep saying, that there's nothing that they can really do unless, maybe if you go to McDavid and Draisaitl and say, hey, would you be willing to rework your contracts a little bit just so we can maybe get 2 or 3 more players to help make an impact? Other than that, there's nothing they can do. It's either they just keep trying to add these supplemental players in and hope they work, or they just tear it all down. There's nothing else they can do.
But at the same time, if I'm Connor McDavid and management comes to me and says, hey, do you think you'd take a pay cut? I'd say, eat shit. I scored 150 points this season.
Yeah,
I gave you everything.
Absolutely.
I gave you everything, and you couldn't do anything around me.
Yeah, and it's also, like I said before, it's definitely to the fault of their front office for sure, because they haven't drafted well, and everybody they've brought in there to try to make the lineup deeper hasn't really worked out all that much. I think the best move, you can argue the best move they've made, would probably be Evander Kane.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's saying something, because he's really not that good. So if that's the best you have to offer to these 2 top players, then I don't know.
Can I say, the Evander Kane penalty, I forget which game it was, game 2 or 3 of that series, was the funniest shit I have ever seen.
Yeah.
Just like the whistle, the period is over, they're skating off the ice, and he just comes flying in.
Yeah, he's not known for being a clean player on and off the ice.
That was if you wanted a caricature of like, oh, it gets rough and tumble in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And you used that as a meme example. That was...
Yeah.
Like, I watched that 40,000 times in 3 minutes. Because I could not stop thinking about it. Of like, he just went. He really just looked at him and said, you know what? What could go wrong? I'm gonna...
Yeah, and... Speaking of that, the players shot themselves in the foot constantly. They had a suspension, they had a bunch of retaliation penalties. Like it was, the front office has not done a good enough job of building around the 2 top players in the sport, and the players that they do have are just taking dumb penalties. It seems like twice a period in the playoffs. Like there's just nothing that they've done to help themselves.
Because like. And again, McDavid and Draisaitl, if I'm not mistaken, they're both on the penalty kill.
I believe so. Because I think it would be stupid if they weren't.
Yeah, because they're insanely talented. So when they're on a penalty, it's not just like in other cases where, if Washington goes on a penalty kill, Ovechkin isn't going to be on the ice. It's that they're still out there, they're just not going to get the chances. And so you're not just taking 2 minutes of total game time away, you're taking 2 minutes ice time away from your 2 stars, which is incredibly detrimental. Because now instead of having 2 minutes to go play, Chell Simulator with the boys, they're trying to mop up a mistake because Evander Kane said, what if I just full speed stick to face? What could go wrong?
What if I just intentionally do something that everyone knows isn't allowed?
Which, and people are like, oh, but stuff goes uncalled in the playoffs all the time. I'm like, subtly. Like, you subtly poke someone in the ribs and they're not going to call them. That's not... That's bordering on a difference between,
That's not up to the discretion of the referees. There's a lot of things that, get, shoved under the rug in the playoffs because you can't just call, 19 penalties a game. So they're going to miss a lot of stuff intentionally. That one...
That was just
they can't do anything. That was it was...
Right.
And I'm surprised he didn't get, more, at least a fine or he might have. I don't know. But
I hope he did.
I feel like for something, a guy with his track record of just doing that constantly, it's like, I just can't believe he only got the penalty in the game and didn't get a fine or a suspension or something, because he does that all of the time. So it's just that we noticed it now because it was on national television. That's all that was. He probably does that on a Tuesday night against the Arizona Coyotes, but nobody cares. But when you're in a playoff series, everybody's going to be like, what are you doing, dude?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so I guess that's pretty much it for the wacky round 2 we had, and we have even wackier matchups in the conference finals. So
I'll briefly say it's not even talking about it because there's not much to go into it. Good for Seattle. Good for them. Good job, boys.
Yeah,
You went to a game 7.
they deserve. Yeah, I'll tip my hat.
I can't wait
tip
for
my
them
hat
to
to
have
them
a
for
second
sure.
year in the playoffs. That team genuinely just. What I think is most encouraging is how hard in the paint Seattle fans went for them. I mean, that was easy sellout in year 2.
Yeah.
The Panthers still aren't selling out Sunrise. And it's
that's crazy.
There.
And I know everybody gives the NHL a lot of shit, especially, I mean, people gave them shit for moving to Vegas. They gave them shit for, picking Seattle. They're, doing phenomenal. So it's just to the point where, Florida, it's tough because, let's face it, not many people cared about the Lightning or the Panthers before the Lightning, won their cups.
Yeah.
Everybody down there is pretty much a Lightning fan over a Panthers fan, because most of them just saw that the Lightning were, winning a whole bunch. They were like, oh, I'll start watching hockey now. If the Panthers did that, you'd have the same amount of Panthers fans. That's all that is. Some markets just haven't done as well, but recently, I mean, Vegas has done phenomenal with selling out crowds, and now you're seeing it with Seattle. And like you just said, that was easy sellouts for them, and they've never had a hockey team there before, and it's just awesome to see, especially the celebrity support in that area as well. It's wild to think that, the more you market yourself, the better things will be. Because I feel like I might just say that this might be a little crazy to say because we are Rangers fans and there's a million celebrities at pretty much every Rangers game. But outside of that, I mean, Seattle might be the best at just, getting the support of the home fans, because I think they've done a great job at just marketing to their fans, and they have a beautiful, beautiful arena. So they've done a great job, and it definitely sucks that, they're not still in the playoffs. I was rooting for them a little bit. Nothing against the Stars. I would have just liked to see more out of Seattle. They were really, really fun to watch. That team is young, and it's electrifying. And the one thing I will say about them, if Shane Wright pans out, that team is scary. That team is really scary because Matty Beniers had a phenomenal first year. And if they can get that 1-2 punch down the middle with the centers, they are a very, very scary team. And the other thing I will say is Philip Grubauer was much better than I expected in the playoffs.
Yeah.
He was pretty much every Seattle game I watched, he was making unbelievable saves. So hats off to them. I didn't expect them to win a round just like everyone else. And they made it to 7 in the second. So we'll see what happens with them. Like I said, they're young, their fans are awesome, and they have a lot of good prospects. So we'll see what shakes out with them.
I'll say a couple quick things, which is if Shane Wright pans out, and Philip Grubauer, who really seemed like he found himself in the playoffs, he's only 31. He's still younger. Like, you could still get... Everyone talks about that contract as it's a foregone conclusion that it's a failure. You could still milk that to be a good contract. He still has enough time on it. He's still at an age... If he rebounds, you're still going to be good for a few more years. And with the marketing thing... Everything that they did to market, every promotion, every marketing stunt they did worked, which is not something that every team can say. I don't know what they found with their marketing team, with their social media team, but they found just perfection with it. They caught lightning in a bottle. And the celebrity promotions, even the mascot that they somehow turned from like a total failure into an overnight success with the fans.
Yeah.
Like the fact that they were able to turn that around. The Yeet the Fish promotion at the end of games now. Like nothing that they've done has felt like a garbage gimmick of like, oh, that's just a team reaching for something. They have all felt legitimate. And that is a huge win for the NHL to go to a market like that has never had a team and just automatically hit the ground running like that is fantastic. To sell out, standing room only, every playoff game you had. Just caps off to the Kraken. I cannot wait to continue to watch that team They are, along with Nashville, I think one of the most fun teams to watch in the sport, not just because of their on-the-ice product, but the fans in attendance. Seattle Kraken fans and Nashville Predators fans are unhinged, and it is incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just crazy. We're talking about the marketing for them, and it's just they have gone completely out of their way to get the support of people in Seattle. And there's just so many franchises that just don't do that. Like, nobody in Arizona even knows they have a hockey team. It's crazy. It's just, I mean, by the way, I believe tomorrow. This is so random, but tomorrow is the day that
the vote.
that Arizona votes on the whatever the situation is going to be with the Coyotes arena.
Yeah, I can't wait for the Atlanta Thrashers V2.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. But I mean, Vegas and Seattle, you just see the way that they rally the support of the hometown fans as compared to all the other teams that don't, are smaller markets. It's just it's crazy. It's not rocket science. It really is not.
They cracked a code, and I'm looking forward to the future for them. They're gonna be a fun team. But I think we're good. I think we've said our piece.
Yeah, that was definitely a lot of information, and most of it wasn't about the Rangers, which I guess is a good thing because I don't have to sit here pulling my hair out for an hour. So
the most vibalicious podcast we've done, we've mentioned the Rangers for all of 5 minutes. That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So we'll see what the hell happens with these very, as everyone expected, this is what the conference finals matchups were going to be. So we'll see what happens. Now that we're here and everybody expected these teams to be here, we'll see how the series shakes out.
This is so stupid. Yeah. So I think we're good. We'll be back to reconverge next week and talk about the first few games of the conference finals.
But and maybe some Ranger stuff will come out, but it'll be a lot of the teams that are still playing, and maybe some Ranger stuff. But we'll see.
Time will tell. So until next week, thank you all for tuning in to the 10th episode of the Rangers Gameplan Podcast. Until we meet again, I'm Weston. Thank you so very much for watching, and as always, go Rangers.
Yep, go Rangers.